Another key feature and principle we can learn from the 1921 revival that began in Lowestoft is to do with what I would call surrendered servants. And if we look at the example of Douglas Brown, who was the minister at Balham Baptist in London, very flourishing church, and he received an invite from Hugh Ferguson, who was the leader of Christ Church in Lowestoft, to come and do a mission in the town, and it says that he accepted gladly that invitation, and he said, if I can be of any service, I will gladly come. I want no fee, but only ask that my expenses be defrayed. But Douglas Brown's subsequent testimony suggests that at the time of Mr. Ferguson's request, he was not as ready to go as his answer implied. And it may have been that very occasion in the autumn of 1920 that was used by God to change the course of Douglas Brown's life and ministry. So Mr. Ferguson's visit and invitation to Douglas Brown, I think, was a pivotal moment. And and even when Douglas Brown did arrive, he came on the back of having flu. He was quite weak when he was here in the revival. He had blood poisoning in his leg. So he didn't enjoy the best of health. He had the flu again after the revival. His health was quite frail in the coming years, and sometimes I think through preaching, I think he preached something like 1,700 times over the months and years of the intense period of the revival. And at one point after it, he said to people, "I really need you to pray for me because I'm spent, I'm tired, I've lost my power." So it cost him a lot, but his surrendered willingness to go is of note. And just to read the wrestling that took place in his own heart. And he said, "God laid hold of me in the midst of a Sunday evening service, and he nearly broke my heart while I was preaching. I went back to my vestry and locked the door and threw myself down on the hearthrug in front of the vestry fireplace, broken-hearted. Why? I know not. My church was filled. I loved my people. I believe my people love me. I do not say they ought to, but they did. And I was as happy there as I could be. I'd never known a Sunday there for 15 years without conversions. But that night I went home and I went straight up to my study, and my wife came to tell me that supper was ready and was waiting. 'You must not wait for supper for me,' I said. 'What's the matter?' she asked. "Have you?" And he said, I've got a broken heart," was his reply. It was worthwhile having a broken heart for Jesus to mend it. I had no supper that night, but Christ laid his hand on a proud minister and told him that he had not gone far enough, that there were reservations in his surrender. And he wanted him to do a piece of work that he had been trying to evade. I knew what he meant. And all November that struggle went on, but I would not give way. I knew God was right, and I knew I was wrong. I knew what it would mean for me, and I was not prepared to pay the price. Then Christmas time came, and all the joy around seemed to mock me. I knew what Jesus wanted. He showed me pictures of my congregation, and Douglas Brown on his knees in the midst of them. I saw Douglas Brown praying for his own folk to whom he had preached for over 15 years. I saw it all in the picture, and the struggle went on, and I said to the Lord, "You know that it is not my work. I will pray for anyone else who does it, but please do not give it to me. It will kill me. I cannot get into the pulpit and plead with people. It's against my temperament, and you made me." See, he was wrestling with what he knew God was calling him to do, to leave where he was and move into an itinerant travelling ministry at that time. All through January, God wrestled with me. There is a love that will not let us go. Glory be to God. At the end of January, I was still like poor Jacob, struggling instead of clinging. I thought that what was wrong was my circumstances, when what was really wrong was Douglas Brown. We can always put it down to our circumstances as long as we can. It was in February 1921, after 4 months of struggle, that there came the crisis. Oh, how patient God is. And on the Saturday night, I wrote out my resignation to my church, and it was marked with my own tears. I loved the church, but I felt that if I could not be holy, I would be honest. I felt that I could not go on preaching while I had a contention with God. And that night the resignation lay on my desk, and I went to bed but not to sleep. And as I went out of my bedroom door in the early hours of the morning, I tripped over my dog. If ever I thanked God for my dog, I did that night. And as I knelt at my study table, the dog licked his master's face, and he thought I was ill. When Mike is a strange name for a dog. Anyway, when Mike was doing that, I felt I did not deserve anybody to love me. I felt an outcast. Then something happened. I found myself in the loving embrace of Christ for ever and ever, and all power and joy and blessedness rolled in like a deluge. How did it come? I cannot tell you. Perhaps I may when I get to heaven. All explanations are there, but the experience is here. That was 2:00 in the morning, and God had waited 4 months for a man like me. And I said, Lord Jesus, I know what you want. You made me to go into mission work, and I love you more than I dislike that. I did not hear any rustling of angel wings. I did not see any sudden light. What can we learn? We can learn that sometimes surrender involves a struggle. And in another very helpful book, Change of the Tide, which is Revivals in the UK by Nigel Patterson, he reflects on Douglas Brown's experience there. And he says, following the example of Douglas Brown before his mission to Lowestoft back in 1921, it would be good to reflect whether the Lord may see any reservations in our surrender to him. There is a moment needed to ask this, as worded below, and a longer time needed to wait for an answer in whatever form that it might come. And that wording, that prayer is, Lord, please tell me if you see any reservations in my surrender to you. That would be a really good question for all of us, wouldn't it? Just to bring to the Lord and just to bring it in a moment, as it says, and then God will give us an answer in his time and in his way. It's not a deep inward, churning things over. But Douglas Brown was wrestling with a conviction of the Spirit. God was doing something in his heart that he had to then wrestle through. And we, those of us who know the Lord, know what that feels like. And the thing we need to learn from this, I think, is the revival would never happen if the wrestling with that dear man and his subsequent surrender to God's call, if he hadn't have surrendered and done what the Spirit was convicting him to do, then countless blessing would have been lost. That's something to really reflect on.